My name is Amanda Miller, and at 28, I never expected to become the center of a family war. When my beloved Grandma Eleanor passed away last month, after her long illness, I discovered through my cousin's accidental text that I was deliberately excluded from the will reading. Despite the knot in my stomach, I showed up anyway. We already divided everything. My Aunt Judith announced with a smirk. You weren't invited for a reason? Then the lawyer frowned, but her name is the only one in the will. The room went deadly silent. If you've ever felt unfairly excluded by family, hit that subscribe button and leave a comment about where you're watching from. Family drama happens everywhere. And I'm about to share how mine unfolded in ways no one expected. Growing up as the daughter of Grandma Eleanor's youngest son, Robert, wasn't always easy. But my father made sure I had a happy childhood. He was the family rebel who chose to become a high school teacher rather than join the family investment firm. My mother, Samantha, was a nurse, and they raised me with values centered around helping others rather than accumulating wealth. Every Sunday, we would visit Grandma Eleanor's Grand Victorian house in the historic district of Boston, a beautiful relic that had been in our family for generations. When I was 12, everything changed. My father died suddenly of an aneurysm, and my mother struggled to cope both emotionally and financially. Grandma Eleanor stepped in without hesitation. Amanda will live with me part of the week, she announced to the family, brooking no argument. For the next 6 years, I split my time between my mother's modest apartment and Grandma's house. While my mother worked double shifts to keep us afloat, Grandma became my second parent. You're like me, Amanda, she would tell me as we sat in her garden. You see people for who they are, not what they can give you. Her words shaped me more than she ever knew. Grandma Eleanor wasn't your typical wealthy widow. She wore simple clothes, volunteered at soup kitchens, and quietly donated to causes she believed in. The grand house was her one indulgence, a home filled with memories rather than showcased wealth. My Uncle Philip and Aunt Judith never understood her choices. They lived in modern mansions in the suburbs, drove luxury cars, and constantly pressured Grandma to live up to her status. When I decided to follow my mother's footsteps and become a nurse, specifically choosing hospice care, my extended family was perplexed. Uncle Philip cornered me at Thanksgiving dinner when I was 21. You could work for the family business, Amanda. Why waste your time on a career with such a low ceiling? He swirled his expensive bourbon while looking down at me. Your grandmother could make one phone call and set you up for life. I simply smiled and said, I want to earn my own way. Uncle Philip. My cousins Rachel and Nathan, both products of prestigious business schools and working for their father, found my choice incomprehensible. They had grown up expecting inheritance and connections to pave their way. Rachel once asked me completely seriously, but don't you want to be rich? The concept that I might value something beyond money was foreign to them. As Grandma aged into her 80s, her health began to decline. I started visiting her twice weekly, bringing groceries, helping with medication, and often just sitting with her. We would bake together using her old recipes, the same ones she had taught me as a child. Her spice cookies were legendary in the family, but I was the only one who knew the secret ingredient was a dash of black pepper. You've got flour on your nose again, she'd laugh, reaching up with a tissue. Even as her body weakened, her mind remained sharp and her wit quick. During these visits, she would tell me stories about our family history that no one else seemed interested in hearing. How her own grandmother had been one of the first female doctors in Massachusetts. How the family fortune had originally come from her grandfather's invention of a specialized textile machine. Stories of struggle, perseverance, and occasional failure that humanized our family beyond the polished facade presented at holiday gatherings. Remember Amanda. She told me during one such afternoon, wealth doesn't make a person worthy. How they treat others when they think there's nothing to gain. That's the true measure of character. Meanwhile, as Grandma's health issues became more pronounced, the rest of the family visited only sporadically. Uncle Philip would stop by monthly, spending more time examining the condition of the house than connecting with his mother. Aunt Judith would bring expensive gifts that Grandma had no use for, then leave after precisely 1 hour. My cousins rarely visited unless there was a holiday meal involved. The December before Grandma passed, she gave me a small wooden box. "This was my mother's," she said, placing it in my hands. Inside was a simple pearl necklace. Nothing flashy or particularly valuable. "It's beautiful," I said, genuinely touched. "I want you to have it now," she insisted. "The others would just see pearls, but you'll understand their value comes from who wore them." I had no idea then that this small gift would later be held against me. The last conversation I had with Grandma, just a week before she passed, still echoes in my mind. She was having a good day, sitting up in her favorite chair by the window. When I was about to leave, she took my hand with surprising strength. "Amanda, I've been watching all of you for years," she said, her blue eyes clear and direct. "I want you to know that I see everything, and soon I'll be making things right." I assumed she was talking about finding peace before her passing. I had no idea she was planning something that would change all our lives forever. The first major rift in our family happened 3 years ago, when Grandma was 85. Uncle Philip called a family meeting at Grandma's house, ostensibly to discuss her care. When I arrived, I found not just family, but also a real estate agent waiting in the living room. "We've been discussing selling the lake house," Uncle Philip announced, referring to our family's vacation property in New Hampshire. Grandma had spent every summer there since she was a child. "It's sitting empty most of the year, and the maintenance costs are ridiculous." I glanced at Grandma, whose expression was carefully neutral, but I knew her well enough to see the tightness around her mouth. "Has Grandma agreed to this?" I asked. Uncle Philip waved dismissively. "Mother understands it's the practical choice. At her age, she can't enjoy it anymore anyway." "Actually," I said, "we were just talking last week about her wanting to spend a few weeks there this summer." The room went silent. Aunt Judith cleared her throat. "Amanda, dear, perhaps you misunderstood. Mother knows her limitations." Grandma finally spoke up. "I did say that to Amanda. I have no intention of selling my lake house." The real estate agent awkwardly excused herself. And once she left, Uncle Philip turned on me. "You always do this," he snapped. "You think you know what's best because you spend more time here, but you don't understand the financial considerations." "What I understand," I replied evenly, "is that Grandma should make her own decisions about her property." That night, after everyone else had left, Uncle Philip cornered me in the kitchen. "Listen carefully," he said, his voice low. "You may think you're special to her, but you're pushing your luck. Don't forget who built this family's wealth, and it certainly wasn't your father. The job about my father stung, but I stood my ground. This isn't about money, Uncle Philip. It's about respecting Grandma's wishes." From that day forward, Uncle Philip began what I can only describe as a campaign against me. It started subtly comments to other family members about how I was manipulating Grandma's suggestions, that I was positioning myself for special treatment in the will. By Christmas that year, it was clear that many in the extended family had turned against me. At the holiday dinner, Aunt Judith accidentally excluded me from the family photo. Cousin Rachel made pointed comments about fortune hunters while looking directly at me. Even my mother's sister, Aunt Grace, who had always been kind to me, was noticeably distant. After dinner, I overheard Uncle Philip talking to my cousin Nathan. "We need to protect Eleanor from Amanda's influence. She's got her wrapped around her finger, and who knows what she's convincing her to do with the estate." I tried to address these suspicions directly. I sent emails to my aunts and uncles explaining that I had no interest in Grandma's money, that I just wanted her final years to be comfortable and on her terms. The responses were tepid at best. Aunt Judith replied with a "We all want what's best for Mother," while others didn't respond at all. The following Easter, the family held a gathering at Uncle Philip's house. I wasn't invited, but learned about it through social media when Rachel posted photos. In one picture, Grandma sat in the corner looking frail and confused. I called her that evening. "Did you enjoy the Easter gathering?" I asked carefully. "It was fine," she said, then lowered her voice. "But they didn't serve the deviled eggs the way I like them. And Philip's house is always too cold. I wish I could have been there," I said. There was a pause. "You weren't invited?" The genuine surprise in her voice confirmed my suspicions. She hadn't been told I was excluded. As Grandma's health declined more rapidly, the family began actively limiting my access to her. Aunt Judith instituted a visiting schedule that allocated me only 2 hours on Sunday afternoons, claiming it was to avoid tiring Mother out. When I arrived for these visits, I often found a cousin or aunt suddenly deciding to drop in at the same time, making private conversations impossible. In response, I found creative ways to maintain our connection. I would bring lunch to share with Grandma on my days off from the hospice center. The home health aide Maria, who genuinely cared for Grandma, would sometimes call me directly when she thought Grandma needed company or was having a particularly good day. The last Christmas before she died, I wasn't invited to the family gathering at all. I received a text from Aunt Judith. "We're keeping the holidays small this year. Mother needs rest." Later, I discovered from Maria that small meant everyone except me. So on Christmas Eve, I dropped off a package with Maria Grandma's favorite spice cookies that we used to bake together, a soft cashmere shawl in her favorite blue, and a photo album I'd created with pictures from her lake house across the decades. When Grandma passed away in April, I didn't get the news directly from family. Maria called me in tears from Grandma's house. By the time I arrived, Uncle Philip and Aunt Judith were already there, speaking with a funeral director about arrangements. "Oh, Amanda," Aunt Judith said with artificial sweetness when she saw me. "We were going to call you, of course." The funeral was a parade of family politics. I was seated in the third row behind extended family members who had seen Grandma maybe twice in the last decade. I wasn't asked to speak despite having spent more time with her than anyone in recent years. Uncle Philip delivered a eulogy that focused largely on Grandma's late husband's business acumen and the legacy he had left the family. Through it all, I kept thinking about what Grandma had said about making things right. I had no idea how prophetic those words would prove to be. 2 weeks after the funeral, I was preparing dinner in my small apartment when my phone pinged with a text message. It was from my cousin Rachel, clearly sent to a group by mistake while reading Tomorrow at Harrison's office. 2 p.m. Mom says not to tell Amanda. I stared at the message, my stomach dropping. A second later, another message followed. "Sorry, wrong thread." "Ignore that, please." I sat down at my kitchen table, a cold feeling spreading through me. So this was how it would be. They weren't even going to tell me about the wall reading. Whatever inheritance Grandma may have left me, they were apparently planning to keep me in the dark about it entirely. All night I debated what to do. Part of me wanted to respect their wishes to rise above the pettiness. I had never cared about Grandma's money. Our relationship had been about love, not inheritance. But another part of me, a stronger part, felt that Grandma would want me there. If nothing else, I deserved to hear her final wishes, even if she had left me nothing. By morning, I had made my decision. I called in to take the day off from work, something I rarely did. I carefully selected my outfit, a simple navy blue dress that Grandma had always complimented professional, but not showy. I wanted to look respectful, not like someone desperate for money. As I drove to the law office in downtown Boston, my hands were shaking on the steering wheel. I rehearsed what I might say, how I would handle the inevitable confrontation. In the parking lot, I sat for several minutes, gathering my courage. "Stand up for yourself, Amanda." I could almost hear Grandma say, "You belong anywhere I wanted you to be." The law office of Harrison and Associates occupied the top floor of a distinguished old building. When the elevator doors opened, I saw them immediately. Uncle Philip and Aunt Judith, my cousins, Rachel and Nathan, Aunt Grace, and her husband Tom, even distant cousin Louis, who had barely spoken to Grandma in a decade. They were clustered in the waiting area, speaking in low voices. Aunt Judith saw me first. Her face froze in mid-sentence, then quickly rearranged itself into a mask of disapproval. "Amanda," she said loudly, causing everyone else to turn. "What are you doing here?" I lifted my chin slightly. "I'm here for Grandma's will reading." Uncle Philip stepped forward, physically placing himself between me and the group. "You weren't invited? This is for family." "I am family," I said simply. "You know what he means," Rachel interjected. "Family who respected Grandma's wishes instead of trying to influence her." Before I could respond, a door opened and an elderly man with silver hair and kind eyes appeared. "Are we all here for the Eleanor Miller estate?" he asked, then noticed the tension. "Is there a problem?" Aunt Judith stepped forward with her most charming smile. "Mr. Harrison, there seems to be a misunderstanding. Amanda wasn't supposed to be included in today's reading." Mr. Harrison looked confused. "Miss Amanda Miller, Eleanor's granddaughter?" "Yes, that's me," I confirmed. He consulted his clipboard. "Then you're definitely supposed to be here. Please, everyone come in." The conference room was elegant, but not ostentatious, with a long mahogany table and comfortable leather chairs. I took a seat near the door, feeling every eye on me. The whispers were barely concealed. She must have found out somehow. "Philippe is going to be furious." After everything she pulled with the lake house, Mr. Harrison cleared his throat, bringing the room to order. "Before we begin, I should mention that I was Eleanor's friend, as well as her attorney for over 30 years. She was very specific about her wishes, and I intend to honor them exactly." He began to reach for a folder, but Aunt Judith interrupted. "Mr. Harrison, I feel I should explain the situation with Amanda. She wasn't invited today because we've already discussed the distribution of most items. We didn't want to waste your time." I felt my face burning as everyone turned to look at me again. "We already divided everything," my aunt announced with finality. "You weren't invited for a reason." Mr. Harrison frowned, looking genuinely puzzled. "I'm afraid there's been a serious misunderstanding, Mrs. Carter." "Nothing should have been distributed yet." He looked directly at me. "And as for Ms. Amanda Miller not being invited." He opened the folder in front of him and adjusted his glasses. "That would be highly irregular, considering the contents of the will." "What do you mean?" Uncle Philip demanded. Mr. Harrison looked up, his expression professionally neutral, but with something like satisfaction in his eyes. "I mean that her name is the only one in the will." The room went deadly silent. I felt as though all the air had been sucked out, leaving us in a vacuum where no one dared to breathe. "That's impossible." Uncle Philip finally sputtered. "There must be some mistake." "I assure you there is not," Mr. Harrison replied, his tone making it clear he was not a man who made mistakes. "Perhaps it would be best if I simply read the will as Eleanor intended." Mr. Harrison put on his reading glasses and began in a clear, steady voice. "I, Eleanor Catherine Miller, being of sound mind and body, hereby declare this to be my last will and testament revoking all previous wills and codicils." The formal legal language continued for a moment before he reached the critical section. "After careful consideration and observation of my family over these past years, I have come to a decision regarding the distribution of my estate. I hereby bequeath all my property, both real and personal, including but not limited to my primary residence at 47 Beacon Hill Avenue, my vacation property at Lake Winnipegossee, all financial accounts, investments, personal belongings, and family heirlooms to my granddaughter, Amanda Rose Miller. There was a collective gasp. Rachel dropped her water glass, sending it shattering across the hardwood floor. No one moved to clean it up. This can't be legal. Uncle Philip said, his face turning an alarming shade of red. Mr. Harrison continued as if he hadn't been interrupted. I have enclosed a personal letter explaining my decisions, which Mr. Harrison will provide to Amanda privately. However, I wish to make clear that this decision was made with full awareness and careful consideration. He looked up from the document. There is more. But perhaps we should address the immediate concerns first. Aunt Judith was crying now, mascara tracking down her cheeks. After everything we did for her, the doctor appointments, the family dinners, maintaining her social standing when she insisted on associating with those charity people. Nathan leaned forward. Well, contest it. She was clearly not of sound mind. Mr. Harrison shook his head slightly. I would advise against that course of action. Eleanor anticipated this reaction and took extensive measures to document her mental competence. She underwent comprehensive cognitive evaluation by 3 separate neurologists in the months before her passing, all of whom certified her as fully competent to make these decisions. As the reality sank in, I remembered Grandma's words. I've been watching all of you for years. She hadn't been making idle conversation. She had been testing us, observing how we behaved when we thought there was nothing to gain. Mr. Harrison reached into his briefcase and removed a sealed envelope. Amanda, your grandmother asked me to give you this letter privately, but given the circumstances, you might want to share certain portions with the family. With trembling hands, I opened the envelope and began to read silently. My dearest Amanda, if you're reading this, then I've moved on to whatever comes next, and you've just discovered that you're my sole heir. I imagine the family is not taking it well. For years I've watched how each of you behaved around me. Philip visited only when he wanted to discuss rationalizing my assets. Judith came with expensive gifts, but never stayed long enough for a real conversation. The grandchildren, except for you, called only on birthdays and holidays. But you, Amanda, you came because you wanted to be with me. You listened to my stories, baked my recipes, and treated me like a person, not a bank account waiting to be accessed. I've been conducting a test these past years. I deliberately mentioned valuable items around different family members to see how they would react. I watched who asked about my health and who asked about my portfolio. I noticed who helped because they cared and who helped because they thought they should. You were the only one who never failed the test. With love and complete confidence in you, Grandma Eleanor. I looked up from the letter, tears streaming down my face, to find the room in chaos. Uncle Philip was on his phone, presumably calling his lawyer. Aunt Judith was berating Mr. Harrison about undue influence. Rachel was sobbing dramatically while Nathan stared blankly at the wall. There's something else you should all know, Mr. Harrison said loudly, cutting through the noise. Eleanor documented everything. She kept meticulous records of visits, conversations, and behaviors. She installed a security system in her home 2 years ago that tracked who came and went. She saved text messages and emails. She even recorded some conversations, which is legal in Massachusetts as long as one party consents. He opened another folder. Furthermore, Eleanor was aware that items had already been removed from her home without her permission. She maintained a complete inventory with photographs of all her possessions. That's ridiculous, Aunt Judith scoffed, but her voice lacked conviction. Is it? Mr. Harrison raised an eyebrow. Then perhaps you can explain why the Tiffany lamp from the study is currently in your living room. Or why Eleanor's diamond tennis bracelet was worn by Rachel at a charity event last month. Or why paintings from the lake house have been photographed in Philip's office. The color drained from their faces. The will includes a condition. Mr. Harrison continued. Any items removed from Eleanor's properties must be returned within 30 days. Failure to do so will result in legal action. Uncle Philip finally exploded. This is your doing, he shouted at me, pointing a trembling finger. You manipulated a confused old woman. You turned her against her own family. I thought of all the Sunday afternoons I'd spent with Grandma, talking about books and birds and family history. I thought of the times I'd driven her to doctor appointments when no one else would take time off work. I thought of the simple joy on her face when I brought her favorite ice cream, just because it was Tuesday. No, Uncle Philip, I said quietly. Grandma knew exactly what she was doing. She always did. The next few weeks were a nightmare. I left Mr. Harrison's office that day with Grandma's letter clutched to my chest and my family's threats echoing in my ears. Uncle Philip's final words to me were, "This isn't over." Not by a long shot. He wasn't lying. The very next morning, my phone began ringing before dawn. First Aunt Judith, then Cousin Rachel, then relatives. I barely knew, all demanding explanations, making accusations, or attempting to negotiate for items they felt entitled to. I stopped answering unknown numbers, but the voicemails piled up. Amanda, this is your Aunt Judith. I expect you to do the right thing here. Your grandmother wasn't thinking clearly. We all know it. Call me back immediately. Hey, it's Nathan. Look, I know we haven't been close, but that silver set was promised to me years ago. I can send you the email where Grandma mentioned it. Amanda, this is Uncle Philip. My lawyer will be contacting you. What you've done is despicable and won't stand up in court. By the end of the week, the harassment had moved online. Rachel posted a thinly veiled attack on social media. Amazing how some people can pretend to care about family just to get what they want. True colors always show eventually. Distant relatives I hadn't spoken to in years were suddenly messaging me, either condemning me or trying to establish a friendly connection now that I had inherited wealth. I changed my phone number and locked down my social media accounts. But the stress was taking a physical toll. I wasn't sleeping. I had constant headaches, and my supervisor at the hospice center noticed I was making small errors I never would have made before. Amanda, is everything all right? She asked after I forgot to document a medication change. This isn't like you. I broke down and told her everything. She immediately insisted I take a week of personal leave. Your patients need you at your best, she said kindly. Take some time to get your legal affairs in order. During that week, I finally visited Grandma's house. My house now, according to the will. I used the key I'd had for years and walked into the silent, empty rooms that still smelled faintly of her perfume. But something was wrong. The house felt hollow. With conspicuous empty spaces on walls and shelves moving from room to room, I began to realize the extent of what had happened. The antique clock that had always stood in the hallway, gone. The collection of crystal figurines Grandma had treasured missing several pieces. Her jewelry box in the bedroom, nearly empty. They had already taken so much. Not just valuable items, but things of purely sentimental value. The hand-knit Afghan Grandma's mother had made. The collection of souvenir spoons from her travels with Grandpa. Even the worn recipe book where she had penciled notes in the margins. I sank onto her bed, stripped now of the handmade quilt that should have been there, and sobbed until I had no tears left. It wasn't about the monetary value. It was the erasure of her presence, the theft of memories I had hoped to keep close. In the back of her closet, I found a small safe I hadn't known about. After trying several combinations that might be meaningful to her, I finally used her birthday, and it opened. Inside was a leather-bound journal, several USB drives, and a note in her handwriting. For Amanda use if necessary. The journal detailed everything. Every visit, every conversation, every borrowed item that was never returned. She had been documenting the family's behavior for years, creating a record that would be impossible to dispute. The USB drives contained backup copies of emails, photographs of her possessions, and even audio recordings. One entry from 6 months before her death stood out. Philip visited today, spent 10 minutes asking about my health. Then, an hour trying to convince me to streamline my estate by selling the lake property. When I refused, he became quite irritated and said I was being irrational about a depreciating asset. What he doesn't know is that I had the property appraised last month. It's worth nearly double what it was when Harold and I bought it. Philip has never understood the difference between price and value. Another entry was even more telling. Judith brought Rachel for a casual visit today. While Judith kept me occupied in the living room, Rachel disappeared upstairs for nearly 20 minutes. After they left, I checked my jewelry box. As I suspected, my tennis bracelet is now missing. I've updated the inventory and taken photos of the empty space. I wonder if they realize there are cameras in the upstairs hallway now. Armed with this evidence, I contacted Mr. Harrison again. I need to fight back, I told him. They've already taken so much. Eleanor suspected this might happen, he said gravely. She was very thorough in her preparations. I'll connect you with a litigation attorney who specializes in contested wills and estate theft. The attorney, Sarah Donovan, was a formidable woman in her 50s with a reputation for being relentless. She reviewed Grandma's documentation and immediately began drafting cease and desist letters to everyone who had taken items from the house. This is one of the most well-documented cases I've ever seen. She told me, "Your grandmother was extraordinarily methodical." The legal pushback only intensified the family's campaign against me. Uncle Philip, true to his word, filed a lawsuit contesting the will on grounds of undue influence and lack of testamentary capacity. Aunt Judith began calling my colleagues at the hospice center, insinuating that I had neglected patients to spend time manipulating my grandmother. The director of the center called me into her office. "Amanda, I know these accusations are baseless, but they're becoming disruptive. Several families have expressed concerns after receiving calls from your aunt. My professional reputation, which I had built through years of dedicated care, was being systematically attacked. The stress became so severe that I developed insomnia and started having panic attacks. My doctor prescribed anxiety medication and strongly recommended therapy. Your physical symptoms are a direct result of this ongoing stress," she explained. "This level of family conflict creates genuine trauma. Just when I thought things couldn't get worse, I received an email from a local reporter asking for comment on the Miller family estate dispute that has divided one of Boston's oldest families. Somehow the story had leaked to the press. That night alone in my apartment with the curtains drawn, I hit my lowest point. I seriously considered giving up signing over the inheritance just to make the nightmare end. I pulled out Grandma's letter again, seeking comfort in her words, when my phone pinged with a text from an unknown number. "Amanda, it's Maria, your grandmother's health aide. I still have some things she wanted you to have, personal things I kept safe. Can we meet?" The next day, Maria handed me a small box. She made me promise to keep these separate from everything else in the house. She said you'd know what to do with them when the time came. Inside the box were more memory cards and a small digital recorder. When I plugged the first card into my laptop, I found dozens of video files. Grandma sitting in her favorite chair, talking directly to the camera. In the first video, dated nearly a year before her death, she looked directly into the lens with clear, sharp eyes. My name is Eleanor Catherine Miller. Today is September 15th, and I am recording this of my own free will, with full mental capacity, as Mr. Harrison can attest. The camera panned to show Mr. Harrison sitting nearby, who nodded and stated his name and the date. I want to explain my decisions regarding my will. Grandma continued. For years I have observed my family's behavior. I have tested their character and their motivations, and I have made my decisions accordingly. She went on to detail specific incidents, dates, and observations that had led to her decision to leave everything to me. Her voice was strong, her reasoning clear and specific. There would be no way for anyone to claim she had been confused or manipulated. As I watched video after video, I felt Grandma's presence wash over me. She hadn't just left me her possessions. She had left me the means to defend her wishes. She had known exactly what would happen and had prepared for it meticulously. In the final video, recorded just weeks before her death, she looked more frail, but her eyes were still bright with determination. Amanda, if you're watching this, then things have gotten difficult, as I expected they might. Remember what I always told you about standing up for yourself. Sometimes kindness means having the courage to enforce boundaries. I didn't raise you to be a doormat, my dear. I raised you to be just like me, and I never let anyone take advantage of me. For the first time since the reading, I felt a spark of my old strength returning. Grandma had trusted me not just with her possessions, but with her legacy. I couldn't let her down. The next morning, I called Sarah Donovan. I have something you need to see, I told her, and brought over all the videos and recordings. After reviewing them, she leaned back in her chair with the first genuine smile I'd seen from her. This changes everything. Your grandmother didn't just build a case, she created a fortress. With this new evidence, we developed a comprehensive strategy. First, we filed a formal inventory of all missing items with a probate court complete with photographs and documentation of their current locations. Then we sent formal legal demands for the return of every item with a clear deadline. Simultaneously, Sarah filed a motion to dismiss Uncle Philip's lawsuit contesting the will, attaching Grandma's videos as exhibits. No judge in the Commonwealth will rule against your grandmother after seeing these, she assured me. We also reached out to the Hospice Sense legal team, providing evidence that the accusations against me were part of a targeted harassment campaign. They immediately issued cease and desist letters to my relatives, threatening legal action if the defamatory calls continued. For additional support, I contacted several of the nurses and aides who had cared for Grandma in her final months. They were happy to provide affidavit about the frequency of my visits compared to the rest of the family. You were there at least twice a week, confirmed Nurse Thompson. Sometimes your uncle would go a month without showing up, then spend the whole visit on his phone. Maria provided a detailed calendar she had kept of all visitors, showing that I had visited Grandma 64 times in her final year, while Uncle Philip had visited 7 times and Aunt Judith 9 times. My cousins had each visited only on holidays. We also obtained financial records showing that Uncle Philip had borrowed substantial sums from Grandma over the years without repayment, and that Aunt Judith had charged numerous personal expenses to Grandma's accounts under the guise of caretaking costs. Armed with this mountain of evidence, Sarah suggested we call a family meeting at her office. Sometimes showing your full hand at once can avoid months of unnecessary litigation, she explained. The day of the meeting I arrived early, my stomach in knots despite our strong position. One by one they filed, and Uncle Philip with his attorney, a nervous-looking man who kept checking his watch. Aunt Judith, who refused to meet my eyes. Cousins Rachel and Nathan, both trying to affect bored expressions that couldn't quite hide their anxiety. Thank you all for coming. Sarah began once everyone was seated. We've asked for this meeting to resolve some outstanding issues regarding Eleanor Miller's estate. Uncle Philip's attorney immediately launched into a prepared statement about significant concerns regarding undue influence and questions about testamentary capacity. Sarah let him finish before responding. "Before we proceed further, there are some materials I think everyone should review." She pressed a button on a remote, and the large screen on the wall came to life with Grandma's face. "My name is Eleanor Catherine Miller." Her clear voice filled the room. "Today is September 15th, and I am recording this of my own free will." As the video played, I watched my family's faces. Uncle Philip grew increasingly pale. Aunt Judith's hand flew to her mouth. Rachel began to cry silently. When it ended, Sarah simply said, "There are 17 more videos like this one, each addressing specific incidents and decisions." Eleanor Miller was perhaps the most thorough client I've ever encountered. She changed the screen to show a spreadsheet. "This is the current inventory of items removed from Eleanor's properties without permission. Next to each item is its location documentation of its removal and its approximate value for insurance purposes. The total currently stands at just over $400,000. The room was deadly silent. "Ms. Miller is prepared to file criminal charges for theft if these items are not returned within 7 days. Sarah continued, her voice matter of fact. "Additionally, we have documentation of financial exploitation that could be of interest to the district attorney's office." Uncle Philip's attorney leaned over and whispered urgently in his ear. After a moment, Uncle Philip cleared his throat. "Perhaps we've all been hasty. Emotions run high after a loss like this, especially when there's money involved." I couldn't help adding, "The meeting ended with Uncle Philip's attorney requesting time to review the evidence and advise his client. 2 days later, he called Sarah to inform her that they would be withdrawing their lawsuit contesting the will. Within a week, items began appearing on Grandma's porch, delivered by moving companies rather than returned in person. The jewelry came back via courier, each piece carefully packaged. No notes, no apologies, but at least they were complying. I hadn't expected to hear directly from any of them, so I was surprised when Aunt Judith called me directly. "Amanda," she said, her voice lacking its usual sharpness. "We didn't realize how much these past years meant to Mother." "You never asked," I replied simply. There was a long pause. "We thought you were taking advantage of her. We didn't understand why she preferred your company so much. Because I saw her as a person, not a balance sheet." Another pause. "Some of us would like to talk, to explain, maybe even to apologize." I considered her words. "I'm willing to listen, but I need time." After we hung up, I sat in Grandma's living room, truly my living room, now surrounded by the returned items that carried her memory. The victories of the past weeks felt hollow in some ways. I had the house, the possessions, the legal validation, but I'd lost what remained of my family in the process. The next day, I took action. I called each family member individually, offering them the opportunity to select one sentimental item from Grandma's belongings. Not the most valuable things, but something meaningful to remember her by. Some declined, still too proud or angry. But Rachel surprised me by asking for Grandma's recipe book. She taught me to make snickerdoodles once, she admitted. It's one of my few good memories with her. Nathan requested Grandpa's old fishing tackle box from the lake house. He took me fishing a few times when I was really little before everything got so complicated. Uncle Philip predictably declined my offer, but Aunt Judith asked for one of Grandma's watercolor paintings, a simple landscape of the lake at sunset. She painted it this summer before she married your grandfather, she told me. I always admired it. These small connections didn't heal the deep wounds that had been inflicted, but they were a start, a recognition that Grandma had been more than her wealth. She had been a person who touched all our lives in different ways. The court officially closed the case the following month, confirming me as the sole heir and legal owner of all Grandma's properties and possessions. The victory was complete, but complicated by the knowledge that relationships had been irreparably damaged. As I stood on the porch of Grandma's house, my house watching the sunset, I thought about how she would feel about all that had happened, the ugliness, the accusations, the greed, but also the final honoring of her wishes. "You did good, Grandma," I whispered to the evening air. "You saw us all clearly, even when we couldn't see ourselves." 6 months after the reading that changed everything. I sat in Grandma Eleanor's garden, now my garden, watching bees buzz lazily around the lavender bushes she had planted years ago. The property had transformed in subtle ways. I'd kept the character and warmth she had cultivated, but added touches that reflected my own personality. New bookshelves in the study, a small meditation corner in the sunroom, wind chimes hanging from the porch ceiling. The house no longer felt haunted by conflict. It had become a sanctuary again, just as it had been during my childhood visits. I'd taken a leave of absence from the hospice center to focus on settling the estate and determining my path forward. The inheritance had given me options I'd never imagined having, but also responsibilities I was still learning to navigate. One rainy afternoon, while organizing Grandma's desk, I found an envelope I had somehow missed during previous cleanings. It was addressed simply to Amanda after everything is settled. Inside was a handwritten letter on Grandma's distinctive stationery. "My dearest Amanda, if you're reading this, then the storm has passed. Knowing our family, it was likely a Category 5 hurricane. But I had complete faith in your strength and resilience. I need to explain something I couldn't put in my official documents. This inheritance was never about punishing the others, though I'm sure that's how they saw it. It was about recognizing the heart that beat so strongly in you. The same heart my Harold had. The same heart your father Robert inherited. Money changes people, Amanda. I've watched it happen throughout my life. It can bring out selfishness, entitlement, and cruelty. But occasionally, very occasionally, it finds its way to someone who understands its true purpose, to create security that allows for generosity. I chose you, not because you were perfect or because you never disappointed me. I chose you because when you made mistakes, you owned them. When you disagreed with me, you did so respectfully. When you helped me, you did it without expectation of reward. The others will claim I was manipulated or confused. But the truth is simpler. I wanted my legacy in the hands of someone who would honor its spirit, not just preserve its value. Now some advice from beyond. Don't let this wealth change who you are. Use it to become more authentically yourself. Take that trip to Italy we always talked about. Fund that pediatric hospice program you dreamed of creating. Keep the lake house in the family someday. You might have children who will love it as we did. And perhaps when wounds have healed enough, find ways to include the family again. Not because they deserve it, but because connection matters. Set boundaries. Certainly I wasn't raised to be a pushover, and neither were you, but leave room for growth and reconciliation. I love you, my dear girl. I'm so proud of the woman you've become, Grandma Eleanor. Tears streamed down my face as I read and reread her words. Even now she was guiding me, offering wisdom and permission to forge my own path forward. In the weeks that followed, I began implementing her suggestions. I established the Eleanor Miller Memorial Scholarship at the nursing school I had attended specifically for students interested in hospice and palliative care. I started the paperwork to create a foundation focused on supporting elderly individuals without family support. People who, unlike Grandma, didn't have anyone to advocate for them in their final years. I took that trip to Italy, visiting the small village in Tuscany, where Grandma's parents had been born. Walking the same cobblestone streets they had walked, I felt a connection to my history that transcended their recent family conflict. As for the family themselves, healing came in small, unexpected moments. Cousin Rachel reached out first, asking if we could meet for coffee. She brought pictures of her new baby daughter, whom she had named Eleanor. "I want her to know the real family stories," Rachel explained awkwardly. "Not just the polished versions we tell at fundraisers. Would you be willing to share some of your memories with her someday?" Nathan invited me to his wedding, though I suspected his fiancée had insisted. Still, when I attended, he made a point of introducing me to everyone as my cousin who runs the Eleanor Miller Foundation. It wasn't warm, but it was acknowledgement. Aunt Judith remained distant but sent a Christmas card with a brief note. "Your grandmother would be proud of what you're doing with the foundation coming from her." It was practically an olive branch. Uncle Philip never came around. Some wounds run too deep, some pride too rigid to bend. I made peace with that reality while leaving the door open should he ever change his mind. The greatest healing came through an unexpected connection. During one foundation event, I met Grandma's nephew Lucas, my father's cousin who had moved to California decades ago. He'd lost touch with the family but had fond memories of Grandma and my father. Robert was the best of us. He told me over dinner he chose teaching over money substance, over status. Eleanor adored him for living authentically. Through Lucas, I discovered a branch of the family untainted by the inheritance battle. Second and third cousins who shared stories and photographs I'd never seen, expanding my understanding of our family history beyond the narrow narrative I'd grown up with. 1 year after Grandma's passing, I hosted a memorial dinner at the house. I invited only those who had genuinely cared for her Maria and other caregivers. Mr. Harrison, a few neighbors who had been true friends, Lucas and his family, and yes, even Rachel and her baby, Eleanor. We shared stories, laughter, and a few tears, creating the kind of gathering Grandma would have loved. As everyone mingled in the garden afterward, Mr. Harrison approached me with a glass of Grandma's favorite cherry. "You know," he said quietly, "I've handled hundreds of estates over my career, seen families torn apart and relationships destroyed over far less than what was at stake here. I'm not sure our family fared much better." I admitted. He shook his head. "You misunderstand me. The miracle isn't that some relationships survived. It's that you remained true to yourself throughout." And Eleanor told me once that her greatest achievement wasn't her wealth or status, but raising a son who valued integrity enough to pass it to his daughter. I looked around at the gathering, not the family I had expected to have, but a chosen family bound by genuine love and respect for Grandma Eleanor on the mantel inside. Her photograph watched over us all, her slight smile seeming to say she had known how everything would unfold. The inheritance had cost me relationships, but had given me something far more valuable. The freedom to live by my own values just as my father had done, just as Grandma had taught me. I understood now that this had been her true bequest, not the house or the money, but the courage to stand firm in my truth. As the evening ended and guests departed, I stood on the porch watching the fireflies emerge in the summer twilight. "We did it, Grandma," I whispered. "We made things right." Have you ever had to stand up for yourself against family pressure? I'd love to hear your stories in the comments below. And if this story resonated with you, please subscribe to hear more tales of family dynamics, unexpected inheritances, and finding strength in difficult situations. Remember that sometimes the most valuable inheritance isn't measured in dollars, but in the lessons and love we carry forward. Thank you for listening to my story today. May you always find the courage to honor your own truth, just as my Grandma Eleanor taught SS.